This also should be somewhat easier because it's an ADHD guideline update. And to put in perspective who is talking, I also have to disclose grant support from federal agencies, NIMH and Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. I have participated in pharmaceutical trials, currently getting support from Otsuka, have in the past been a consultant to Shire, and have several non-paid honorary positions. What I want to do is look over things that are new since 2 years ago. We are operating under some new guidelines. We are operating with the benefit of several new reviews that have come out. And then I tried to close the gap between these reviews or guidelines and now. So there's also a literature review from 2010 to present. Some brief comments on aggression and ADHD, but we've already really addressed that. So in the interest of time, that will be fast. And then the potential implications for updating our current medication guidelines for ADHD. The time frame is basically such that for the guidelines by the American Academy of Pediatrics, they reviewed the literature from 1998 to 2009 and then came out in 2011 with their product. I will review that briefly. Then Alice Chirac and her group conducted this incredibly extensive review that reviewed literature from the beginning of time to May 2010 for children under 6, and from 1997 to May of 2010 for children 6 years and older. That's an incredibly super duper resource that I'll briefly touch on. There were Cochrane reviews released in the period from 2008 to July of 2012, and they basically reviewed whatever literature was there, also kind of going back in time for a long time period. And then the literature review that I did covers this time period. So first, especially for our colleagues that are in the area of pediatrics, they would basically currently be operating under the new guidelines released in November, which took 2 previous guidelines and wrapped them into one, and then also expanded the reach into younger children, ages 4 onward and up through age 18. They did a very extensive evidence-based review. They had help from the CDC, from AHRQ, the University of Oklahoma, and what they did was they reviewed PubMed, PsycInfo, and ERIC, reviewed over 8,000 citations, and then sifted that into 6 action statements that were meant for implementation in a process of care algorithm. And I'm briefly reviewing those here because I think we would like to overlap those with our current guidelines. So basically, they're saying a primary care provider should initiate an evaluation. They shouldn't dodge it. They should initiate it if a child presents with problems and symptoms, that this evaluation should be based on DSM-4 guidelines, but they're also hinting at, of course, this will change when DSM-5 comes along, that there should be an active assessment for comorbid conditions, and then that the care should be planned in the context of a chronic care medical home model, pre-planned, anticipating that some extra actions have to be put into place to do it well. And that here is where it gets kind of more the rubber hits the road. Treatment choices. Interestingly, the way they word it is for preschoolers, prescribe evidence-based behavioral treatment first and may prescribe methylphenidate is how they're putting it. They're actually spelling out that they don't see enough evidence to use amphetamines. For school-age children, 6 to 11, the recommendation is for an FDA-approved ADHD medication, which covers stimulants, atomoxetine, and then the extended versions of alpha agonists. And then here, see this and/or evidenced behavior therapy. And then the recommendation for adolescents, an FDA-approved ADHD medication with assent by the adolescent and may prescribe evidence-based behavior therapy. And then the recommendation, titrate doses to achieve maximum benefit at minimal side effects. So that seems all kind of to overlap pretty well with the guidelines that we have in place, with maybe a little bit of tweaking required to get us in line with this. Now, the 2011 comparative effectiveness review, I would like you to be aware of it, as it's an incredibly fantastic resource that comes packaged in several products. And they did this extensive lit review identifying 233 studies and have produced for us a full over 300-page report, an executive summary, and beautifully targeted summaries for clinicians, targeted summaries for parents and caregivers. You can also get slide deck downloads and CME activities. So it's kind of a family of products that has come out of it. And I've put some of those into your handouts because they, I think, are meant to be very user-friendly and might have some potential also to link to from the Florida guidelines. Now, 300 pages. Here's what they did. They basically said, we're going to classify this into a system that says we either have high strength of evidence, further research is very unlikely to change the confidence in estimated effects, or moderate, further research may change the confidence. A low strength of evidence would be further research is likely to change the confidence, and insufficient evidence would be evidence is either unavailable or does not really permit estimation of an effect yet. So this was the methodology that they used. And then let's condense the bottom line of 300 plus pages is basically that they said, for children under age of 6, we have effectiveness and safety information, parental behavior training. It's efficacious with the standardized mean difference of improving things, lowering problems, minus 0.68. For preschoolers, methylphenidate, not FDA approved under 6, also efficacious. Here you see the standardized mean difference. And then they also are making reference to school-based intervention for children that come from lower socioeconomic strata. Can't really produce an effect size or estimate, but they thought it was important enough to mention it. And so we might want to tuck that away for our consideration, because there was a request for perhaps making more reference to non-medication interventions. For age 6 and older, they focused specifically on long-term effectiveness, not on short-term trials. And there things look as follows. For methylphenidate, they identified this at the level of, this was one bullet was less than moderate, was the strength. Effect size minus 0.54 over a period of 14 months. There were data for atomoxetine with a slightly larger standard mean difference. And they said for the extended release guanfacine, insufficient standard strength of evidence because of a lack of completion of follow-up, and also for long-term effectiveness for behavioral parent training or academic interventions, currently insufficient strength of evidence. And that's really important because ADHD is a chronic condition, so really we need chronic treatments. So even though we have a bunch of studies and we have immediate efficacy for longer term treatments, there still is actually a fair bit of work to do. Moving on, I had looked at the Cochrane reviews because ADHD also prompts interest in other interventions. So I was actually surprised. I had not done this before I sat down to do this work here. So they had done reviews for meditation therapy, homeopathy, mixed in social skills training, parent training. But note here, that's parent training not for the preschoolers, but includes older youth, family therapy, risperidone for ADHD and persons with intellectual disability, fatty acid research, and pharmacological treatment for ADHD and TIC. And I would say for purposes of our guidelines update, we can say that really none of these are currently strong enough to draw conclusions from. For the parent training, here we see some support for effects of parent stress and general child behavior. Why is this different from the results that came out of the Chirac review? Because she had looked at preschoolers, younger age group. So we get more bang for our buck when we do parent training with younger children and don't wait until they're already school-aged. But otherwise, really either no support or here, little evidence to support limited data showing improvement on combinations. This is something where we have some emerging newer literature that might challenge that, but I don't think it's of any strength to where I would recommend that we put that into our updated guidelines currently. The literature review that I did, looking at literature from 2010 to present, I focused on PubMed because this was supposed to be focused on drug studies and used these filters for it. And basically for studies focusing on children under the age of 6, identified 58 records potentially promising, and then when I screened them, excluded the majority of them because they were not apropos, did a full text review of 10 of them, and identified one study that I will talk to you about in a little bit more detail, and that is the atomoxetine study, double-blind, placebo-controlled study of atomoxetine in young children with ADHD. This was a 3-site, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. They had a 1-to-1 random assignment, were supervised by an independent data safety monitoring board, and were able to enroll 93 subjects, expectedly mostly male, 13 non-Caucasians, and these were 5- and 6-year-old children at enrollment. 18 of those withdrew before completion. They required that this is typical for young children, that the ADHD was present for at least 9 months, the symptomatology, that they were of at least, had an IQ estimate of above 70, and they needed to be in an out-of-home peer group at least 2.5 days a week so that you could get teacher ratings. They did a flexible titration of atomoxetine to a maximum of 1.8 milligrams per kilogram, and then also delivered concurrent psychoeducation. So everyone received psychoeducation along with the medication. So they didn't try and give them psychoeducation first as then a rule out. If you get better, then you don't participate in the trial like in the PAT study. Did fairly traditional outcome measurements, ADHD, RS total score, CGIs, global assessment of functioning, and then this is kind of going to be like a litany of the same. Safety, AEs, height, weight, pulse, blood pressure, lab screening, physical exam. And we're basically able to document that treatment with atomoxetine separated from placebo, and we can see this happening by about week 4. In the efficacy outcomes, they reached a mean final dose of 1.4 milligram per kilogram, which is great. That's the allowed amount. So even though they could go higher, they actually found that they didn't if you allowed titration. Parent ratings, they were able to get an effect size of 0.7, and for teachers slightly lower, 0.6. Number needed to treat here was 6, so relatively respectable. I will say personally, I tend to still, when I do informed consents, maybe not have high enough expectations of atomoxetine. This seemed to be quite respectable, and that's one reason why I took a little bit more time to present this here, because when we're updating our under 6 guidelines, we're really skating on thin ice, so we have a little bit more ice to skate on, I would say. Safety outcomes, no differences in labs, EKG, or mean change in heart rate or blood pressure. They did observe differences in weight, as expected, with a slight amount of weight loss on atomoxetine, and some GI symptomatology, decreased appetite, GI upset, some sedation. Interestingly, the way the article is written up, they're emphasizing that this was generally well tolerated, reduced course symptoms, but that despite the benefit, the children remained on average significantly impaired at end of study. That was highlighted, and also highlighted that these were children that had gotten the McMahon forehand parent training along with it. So this was not a magic bullet, even though there was respectable symptom improvement.